Welcome to Shone's Thoughts. My name is Shone with a W, and you're here with me today in this homeland park, I'll call it. Sharing this amazing moment in time that we've captured together. And what I want to discuss is, well, whatever comes to my mind. Yeah, there's a lot of different things I was thinking that I could talk about when I'm walking, or as I was walking on my way to this podcast, and I kept looking for the perfect position, the perfect place to sit down and share what all I had to think today. And you know, when I was growing up, we didn't have a mass transit system, and I mean growing up when I was in my younger teenage years. And then when I was, I guess, around 15 years old, they opened up a SkyTrain, which was, a train on platforms above the streets. And so it allowed me to have a rather more expansive view of the world I lived in. See, riding my bike, I was only ever able to go by myself a certain distance until having to ride on my bike, I would have to, of course, go the other way. Yet when I was just essentially becoming a teen, I had that SkyTrain now that I could take or travel to Vancouver, and I could go that longer distance, and the world kind of expanded for me, and of course it expanded. You know, the funny thing, of course, is with all expansion, it brings expansion other ways as well. People have noticed that when you have mass transit, you also have a lot more poverty and, crime, because crime itself is able to therefore easily move around and such. So, there's positives and negatives, or pros and cons as they like to label it, about what change can bring, what expansion can bring. There's always things that, we have to let go of. And perhaps for some people, the idea of letting go of their hiddenness, their exclusivity, rather than back in the older times, you had a lot more crime or poverty. It was more centralized in certain areas. But once you have that mass transit, especially the mass transit system we have, which when it first opened up, it was done on a I'll trust you, pay us basis. And there would occasionally be officers who would get on the trains and make sure everyone had tickets. Those should be called conductors, but for some reason they had to use actual officers. But nonetheless, yeah, I don't know. Scanning, going back to where I was. No, I guess I don't really want to be even doing a podcast right now. To be honest, I know that I have put up so many audios out there on my playlist on YouTube. I see my Sean's Thought podcast has 190 episodes, almost 200 episodes. And yet the most recent episode that I had, YouTube is showing me that I've had an average of 16 seconds view times for four people, although, yeah, for two people I mean, but although one other screen shows 4. I've invested so much time and effort into these videos, and essentially I have a rather large concept coming out as an extension of my Sean's Thoughts podcast, and that is talking about healing and all the modalities of healing. And of course I'm essentially plugging it again because I really do want to get it started, and there's a few things that I'm awaiting to fall into place. And I say awaiting, not waiting, because even though I don't really want to do this podcast right now, I'm still doing it. I'm doing it because the act of creating is the important part, as I've often mentioned before, to what we should be or could be, or, would do if we wanted to have that revelation of a brand new world much quicker, because I feel that creating is a very important part of why we're here and how we get out of here. you break all that down, there's a lot in there, but my overall point, without getting too deep into anything, is that when we create, we add to our reality. And when we create with higher vibrations, such as wonder and ponder and arts and crafts and dance and singing and all those lovely stuff, we add to our own personal realities. And I think that adds to our overall energetic field. Maybe if we look at it as like who we are as a system. You know, I was thinking about that the other day as I walked through the forest prior to making my last I Am the Word video series part 2. And when I was walking, I came across, or I manifested perhaps, a patch of wild blackberries and some salmon berries. And it was pretty big patch. And anyways, as I was eating them, I was thinking to myself that what I'm actually doing in that moment is I'm adding these berries which have a very high vibration to them. Not only because they're natural, but because they haven't had chemicals added onto them in the farm. They haven't had, pesticides or fertilizers and such, and they haven't had machinery and smoke and oil around them. So these berries, starting just right off at the beginning, they're holding a higher vibration simply because they don't have those toxins which lower the vibration. And so it occurred to me that as I was eating them, that with each berry I ingested, I was taking on the energy of the berry and adding it to my own field. And yeah, it's the idea that whatever it is that we consume, that morsel of food has a vibrational energy attached with it. When it's toxic, when it's low, like when it's lower vibrational, such as it's not good for you, or it's high fructose corn syrup, or any of those other things that, we belch and burp and fart because, that all of that stuff brings down the vibration of the food. But when I was eating these berries, I was adding those vibrations to that. And then in another audio today, I was listening about living water and about how living water is recirculating at a higher rate all over our planet right now. And, living water perhaps being an example, so you can kind of like imagine it, would be water that you find in a celery plant. Maybe not the exact same, but it's the higher quality of water. See, one of the things that I've talked about often in healing is my experience with celery and with celery juicing, especially cold press juicing. That the celery plant itself, it contains these sodium salt clusters that are really good for healing, amongst a series of other different nutritional compounds and such. But living water was something that I mentioned, or that perhaps it's been coined, because the water within the celery plant, especially when cold pressed juiced, has a lot of power to it, a lot of nutrients. And so, you can look at it as that our world right now perhaps has a lot of living water from celery juice. Like all of our water, rather than it just being normal contaminated water, is getting more diluted or more mixed with living water, healthier water. That when you look outside in the world and, you see a lot of the crazy stuff that's going on, well, there's a lot of great things going on as well, but if you're too caught up in it, you perhaps don't see the massive expansion of greenery, grass being cut more often, and trees being pruned more often, and a lot more happening, including when I was talking about eating those berries. That was in a very large woodland, wetland, marshland type of area. And there were lots and lots of blackberry bushes. But what was different about these blackberry bushes is the little green berries, they're not yet ripe. There was so many of them. I've never, ever seen the amount of berries that was coming off of all of those trees. And there was many. I estimate that, there's a good 10, 20, 30,000 blackberries, and there's just such an immense amount of, fruiting happening already. And in the past audios, I've talked about how my experience last summer was that trees that had never fruited before, that I'd walked by for almost 2 decades, they were massively fruiting. So much fruit that the trees were sometimes falling over. It was just simply amazing. And somehow this goes with how or what's happening with the living water. And that is, as I said, something that can be seen if you have the eyes to see it. It means, the imagination or the wonder, or more importantly, the slow down and smell the roses type of feeling, rather than being so on the go, 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 go. Yeah. Going back to what I was saying about the project that I'm really excited to do, it's the healing stuff. It's talking about the healing stuff. Because I believe that there is so much potential open energy for transformation during this transition, with all of the potential that we have to heal, release, and let go of all that we've known. Like, just think about this. And here's maybe a what if that I'll do. What if in a single day everyone forgave everyone for everything they ever did? Just imagine that for a second. Imagine that possibility. I'm not interested in hearing all the reasons why it can't happen. But just imagine if something like that were to happen. Everyone, unanimously, unilaterally, or just all together, we just all decide, okay, we're going to let all of the past go, and we start the world over again. I mean, not the whole world. We can keep doing things exactly like we've done in the past, even people that are doing it, but then maybe by just letting all of those grievances go, we would have the chance to start over with everyone that we knew in our lives. And if we were able to do that, if we were able to stop telling all of our negative stories, because, we didn't need to tell them anymore. We didn't need people to align with us or, agree with us or support us or defend us. We didn't need any of that stuff because we just simply forgave everyone. Where would we be? And could you imagine a world like that where you didn't have anyone that you were upset with? Now, yes, there are some people that say, I forgave everyone. And then you bring up certain things and they start getting triggered. Maybe it's an ex-person or, something someone did at one point in time, or, just getting cut off when you're driving. Because even getting cut off when you're driving is essentially, it's a trigger, as if you've had something happen before in the past, something you haven't let go. And then when it happens, you're triggered. Because for all we know, the person that's cutting you off accidentally dropped something in their lap, a hot whatever, and they did their best to stay on the road, but yet, you were able and willing and, responsive enough that you were able not to have an effect. So therefore, you were on top of your game. And so what happened to the other person, if we didn't have that trauma perhaps from the past, from however that came about, that even that interaction would be considerably different. Like, as I said, it's not necessarily about if we could do this or what's the plan to do it. It's just imagining the possibility of it. And therefore, by imagining the possibility of it, remaining in a state of wonder and, thinking of all the cool things that could happen. Yeah, just even thinking about in relationships, oftentimes we're so stuck in our ways that even though we know we're wrong about something, because of our ego or our desire to, save face, as the Chinese call it, but hold on to ego, we refuse sometimes to allow other people in our lives to know that we recognize what we did as wrong. And then that even holds back and limits so many different potentials that we have. Because we're holding on to, shame possibly, or guilt, believing that if we admitted something, that we were opening ourselves up to more, shame and guilt, because people would look at us and, judge us, condemn perhaps, stone, throw rocks, or at least, say something bad on Twitter or whatever it's called now. Yeah, what a world could be like that. I guess, in a sense, that's kind of why, although I would prefer to not have created an audio tonight, maybe just that message is perhaps great for someone to hear. And sometimes I get the idea of maybe that's why the podcast hasn't had its reach that I would have imagined it would have had by now. Because, those people out there that I'm meant to connect with, the pieces in between just haven't connected yet. And, that could simply mean, as I've often talked about, that one influencer out there that's, uncertain even about my podcast, or has yet to find the podcast because haven't seen the video pop up into the recommendation feed and therefore haven't clicked on it and then haven't been called, because perhaps all of those things have spaces or transitional steps in between, and those steps could even be you. Like they could. It could be someone here now listening to this that ends up sharing this video or whatever other video is called to them to someone who is that influencer, and then all of a sudden, bam, we're living a considerably different world, because not necessarily anything that I have to say, but that perhaps I'm the one who connects two people, and those two people are the ones who make the amazing changes that create our world to be such a better place. Or perhaps someone that I have been influenced by myself, Ram Dass, Kim Gogin, Kevin Trudeau, Greg Braden, Carrie Kay, a numerous amount, even Caroline Mace, so many different people, Bashar, but that something in one of those people's talks creates an cognition or an insight so profound that that person suddenly creates something extraordinary. So everything, I kind of think life is truly like a spider web or a tapestry, and there's so many different parts in there. So if you feel called to it, and even if, there's a concern, a worry, a fear within you, do your best to heal that. And if you feel, when you're feeling worry, fear, or any of that stuff, when you feel like a negative feeling about, or an apprehension, anxiety about doing something, before I actually get into my TFT videos, I'm going to suggest taking two of your fingers, putting your index finger underneath your middle finger, and then wherever you're feeling that feeling of pain or pressure in the body, especially when you're having a emotional reaction to perhaps fear or such, tap on yourself. And then it's called a sore spot, but it's on your top of your chest, in the clavicle area, I think it's called, but it's that soft, tender part, and there's a part on both of your right and left of your chest. Kind of, you'll feel it's a tender part. If you want to get more information on that, go into my TFT video that I did, my introductory, and I show that particular soft spot, or the clavicle spot. I forgot what it's exactly called, but anyways, press into that area and kind of like massage your area in a clockwise fashion, and then think about releasing whatever trauma that was in that area that you were tapping on. And that can be a rudimentary way, I think rudimentary is the right word, of letting go trauma. And sometimes it's trauma that you don't even have to know about. And that is truly why I'm super excited to do those healing videos. And I'm slowly working on them. I would love to be faster. Also, I would love, 1 million supporters on Patreon. That would be super cool, because bam, the whole world would be different. Mostly because I would see the world different. And just because I would see the world different, the world is extremely different. I do believe that we have so much potential to co-create our reality. And you can just imagine it like this, if you want to think about how we affect our reality, because this is for certain. You go out into your day And every person you come across, you tell them a positive, uplifting story, or you smile at them because you don't know them, and you allow people to, go first all the time, to the point maybe like you're debating who can go first because you're all doing it. Now imagine that. Now imagine the other person who wakes up and's unhappy with everything and goes about their day being unhappy with everyone. Now think about those two people being the two polarities of energy, negative and positive. And so it's that person that goes out into the world, that every person they're coming into contact with, even if they're in a bad mood and they can maintain their positive mood or their upbeat mood, they are adding more energy to other people's system, keeping in the idea that the plus sign, the positive, is adding to that experience, adding to that energy field that that person has. Versus the negative one, you can kind of look at it as consuming. They're consuming energy. Darkness, like darkness consumes the light kind of thing. But anyways, that's a great example, without getting metaphysical or anything, about how we truly do create the realities we're in. Because if we go out there and we're all grumpy and we come into someone else who's more grumpier, there's a resistance and perhaps even a fight there. And so that's affecting your reality. And even if you go to work and, you're all ill-tempered at work, it could be as easy a reason as you didn't get enough sleep the night before because X number of reasons. Mostly that, oftentimes it's lacking self control with how late a person stays up. Thinking that, they can push their way through it, but not recognizing that they're snapping at people. But anyways, think about all those situations that person who's in bad vibration, low vibration, goes through the day. Yes, they can therefore, have their cup of coffee and all of a sudden they're upbeat and, chipper, and they've had a good sale at work and all of a sudden they start being positive. But, everything's a balance. Nonetheless, they've added or they've taken away from the positivity of their reality. They've created negative events, and those negative events can go on to ripple upon other people's negative events, especially when you get a group of people sitting around being negative around a table, smoking cigarettes, talking about politics and how they don't like it. And that energy can grow and get bigger and then open other people up for issues. So, as I said, you don't even have to get into the idea of we're all a big ball of light, and those events that are positive add to your ball of light, and those situations that aren't take away from your ball of light. You can look at it like that too, and that's kind of how I envision it and see it. So, the whole point of that is how I've come to see healing is essentially taking those two peoples with those balls of light, and you're looking at as if there's an idealized version of both of those characters. See, even the ball of light is working to improve themselves, and the other one who has a lot of darkness in them, they're also, if they're ready, looking to improve themselves. And healing, for me, I have found, is not about pretending to be in a high vibrational state. It's looking and examining the field that you have around you, your big ball of light, if you want to call it that, and finding those places within us, those things that, as I was saying about like tapping on that area, sometimes you can even feel it in your physical field, or at least I can during my own experience. And when things come up in our lives, dealing with them, anything, whatever it is, and looking at all situations that come in our lives, especially those negative ones, and seeing what lesson there is to learn there. And that the whole deal with healing is that you're letting go those traumas, and therefore your vibration is rising, no matter what your start point is. And that both of those people in the process of healing are looking to align with a higher true version of themselves, simply a version of themselves that has those attributes that each of us would prefer to have, perhaps even. More importantly, to be in alignment with the Christ frequency. And that's a frequency, as I see it, of love, of, connective love that connects and unites and supports through compassion and all those lovely things. So I think that healing allows us to get to that space, to that point of alignment. And, maybe, just maybe, if we're all to do enough healing and enough letting go, and as I said, even doing those forgiveness stuff, or at least getting towards that direction, because when we heal things, it's also about healing. And forgiveness is also healing, because you're letting go and you're working through the trauma, you're releasing that trauma, you're healing that trauma, which gave you sometimes even physical illnesses. Oftentimes people don't recognize, but we have a lot of our physical illnesses simply because we're holding on to, traumas that are from accidents, yes, but also from emotional issues that we've held on to for a long time. And once we let go of those emotional issues, which, by the way, TFT truly does do, it helps let you get rid of those emotional traumas that sometimes show up on your body as physical feelings. And at least that's how I see it. And I've always noticed that after I tapped on something that was painful, even right here, that if it was just one of those phantom pains that come and go, rather than thinking that there's something wrong, I'd tap on it, it would go away, because I would be disrupting the meridian where the energy is traveling through, perhaps even, or I'm maybe opening up the meridian so that the energy can flow. And by doing that, I'd feel good afterwards, because I wouldn't be dealing with that. That would even sometimes work with headaches. Finding that when I had a headache, I would look for where's the tightness in my body, and if I can reach it, doing some tapping on it. Part of massage is loosening up the tight physical areas. Tapping is loosening up the tight energetic areas. Maybe that's a really good way of putting it. So, yeah. Perhaps there is a good reason why, or not a good reason why, but there is a reason why these videos haven't been getting as far as they should, as they could, as they are going to, and they already have. So I'm not even worried about that, because everything that I create is permanent. Forever a recording, at least how we understand it in our world, everything that becomes digital remains. See, I put this video on my phone, and my phone is stored somewhere else as well, and then you got all those clouds, and you upload it to YouTube, and then YouTube's saving the video somewhere and the audio, and other people are doing it. It's all over the world, and it essentially remains forever. So there might be people who are going to be listening to this in 10 years, learning from whatever it is that I had to say, or it might not even be learning from, but something in this audio, they're sitting there, they have nothing else to do, all the other data files are destroyed, and so we only have this one audio, and they're like, okay, well, fine, put it on. And then one word gets them to think about something, and, it changes the course of their life. We are all that special to be that important to change one person's lives. We are all that special. That's kind of something that I've been working at, perhaps even getting over. Being belittled when I was younger all the time for everything I did. Always pulling down my energy and criticizing. And, in school, I definitely was a different type of kid. I liked to learn. I liked love. I instantly liked both of the sexes. I never had this dislike for girls that the boys had. I was always completely respectful of all girls. I loved girls. I loved the anatomy of women. And during school, I wanted to learn. In the lunchtime, I was in the library and I was learning. I was studying extra. I wasn't skipping school. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't having teen pregnancies, although my first girlfriend, I realized when I look back as I was going through all my traumas, one of the paths that I could have had in my life was a teen pregnancy. That could have derailed my ability and the course of my life to expand the way that I have expanded. The fact that I did backpack over China, Japan, Korea, Mexico, and parts of the UK. That wouldn't have happened if I had got into that teen pregnancy, which that I easily bypassed because, I just did. Yeah. But back to what I was saying about healing, because this audio really is about talking about healing and, getting people to recognize that sharing is caring. So share this video and watch it, listen to it often. I feel that as we all heal even more, and part of that healing is just going to be natural healing. It means no effort necessary. Yeah, we can mess it up and we can re-trigger ourselves after we heal because we can keep doing those routines that we know that aren't good for us. But just by, even what I was talking about, the living water, just by that activity, adding it that energy to our field, just like I was with those blackberries, and actually with a heck of a lot of water. I love to drink white water, rapid flowing water from rivers, and I know there's a lot of living water in there, and that's just so delicious and clear. But nonetheless, every day, at least in the west coast of Canada, as that's where I'm from, it's been raining like lots and lots of torrential rains and downpours, and then it's perfectly sunny the next day. It's very beautiful. And that leads back to what I was saying about the greenery. A lot of the plants are getting a lot more green. I'm actually looking at a tree across the way from me that looks like it does have apples on it. And I wonder how many people can actually or do look up to see that. Yeah, I'm going to go over there and look at it after. But nonetheless, yeah, healing is vitally important, and it will definitely lead us to the path, or at least in the direction of being in that state where we could all eventually forgive. And even if we can't forgive everyone, what if we unilaterally made the first step and we all forgave one person? And we did that through numerous different ways, TFT, but also, talking about it, or, working through it, or however it is that you get to it, the physical healing, like energy healing and such, or, meditation or stillness or journaling or binaural beats or anything, Epsom salts, like just releasing that energy. Anyways, I'm going to let you go now. It was so nice talking to you. And as I said, I really do hope, I trust, I have faith that things are getting better, and every step forward that each of us takes, leaving behind all that doesn't serve us any longer or no longer serves us, will definitely get us to go in the direction. And if there's that one day where we all did the one thing, it could be the same thing, I guess, but any one thing to improve our lives and not to add to the negative parts of our lives in that one day, how great of a change in this world could we have? I'm looking forward to seeing it because I believe it's coming.